Welcome to Kingdom Mothers Rise Up, where I encourage and equip you to heal your heart and renew your mind so you can live the fully abundant life Jesus promised you. Let's go. It's time to move.
Today's podcast episode is answering a listener question about teaching children to be considerate instead of being selfish. If you would like to ask a question to possibly be answered on a future episode, you can leave it in the fan mail or in the comments with question marks at the beginning, and I will read those and come back to them in future episodes. That also brings up fan mail. There is an option on my podcast to leave me comments in what they call fan mail. I can't respond to those directly, but I will respond to them here. A recent question was, I had referred to a book about my personal story and apparently forgot to mention the book. So the book is called Mess to Majesty, Let God Love You in Your Mess. It's available on Amazon. When you buy it, there's also a link to some free resources that go with that book, some journaling pages. And if you are on my email list, you'll get updates about when I'm going to run a new group coaching program through the Mess to Majesty transformation. Now we'll get into today's episode.
Lila asked about teaching children to be considerate of others instead of being selfish. How old are they? What kind of ways are they showing selfishness? I don't have those details, so I will just start with, in general, the most powerful way we have to teach our kids anything is by modeling. And so to look at, are there ways that they're getting a message, even if it's because of a childish understanding of something that's appropriate? Is there a way that they're getting a message that it's okay to be selfish? And like I said, that could just be a childish misunderstanding of what you're doing, because like obviously as a parent, it can seem like you always get your way because you're the one in charge and you're the one responsible. So if the kids are old enough to talk through that with them, of like realizing the difference in responsibility and authority versus being selfish. And if there's, things to talk through, if there's things to repent of and to ask your kids for forgiveness for, that is super powerful. But then just depending on the age of your kid, I like to do object lessons. Stories have a big impact, and object lessons are kind of like that. They kind of build a story to give something to remember. If you get 2 packages of candy, identical, say bags of M&Ms, carefully open one bag and fill it with small rocks or beads or something so that it still feels like M&Ms in there, and seal it back up. And so then gather the kids and have them like, hey, look at this, I got us some M&Ms, and give them the bag that doesn't actually have M&Ms in it. And, how does that feel? That for them to process through, like, how did that feel for them to get the not candy, even though it was presented to them as candy? And like, I think I used this for honesty and trust. But it still shows how like that's disrespectful and selfish of you to keep the candy and give them the not candy. And so talk about like, okay, so here's things that you've been doing that make me feel like you felt when you got the bag of beads instead of M&M. And so some things where you can help them identify those emotions and situations where you're like, okay, this is what it feels like. This is how you're making other people feel when you're doing these things. If they're at the age to help connect with that. Just to say it. Highlighting it when you see it, either when they do it or when someone else does it, to build that vocabulary of like, when I'm talking about being considerate, this is what it looks like. Or when I'm talking about being selfish, this is what it looks like. Because sometimes we forget to train our kids and equip them, because like we just expect them to know what we're talking about without checking and verifying that they do in fact know what we're talking about. And I remember an example from a book I read by Sproul where he talked about his kids he had told them, he was working in the yard, and he had told them not to get off the stoop. And they kept getting up, and he kept disciplining them. I don't know if he was giving them a swat or whatever for it, and telling them, like, now don't get off the stoop. And after like the third time, he was like, what is the deal with this? And figured out they didn't know what he meant by the stoop. So it was a term that, whatever, if they hadn't been in that location before, or they'd normally used a different term. But so they weren't disobeying to be bad. They were disobeying because they didn't know what he was talking about. And so just to keep that in mind when we're frustrated with our kids' behavior, to make sure that they actually know what's expected and that we've trained them for that, rather than just expecting them to know, because they don't. Using stories, whether it's a book you're reading or Adventures in Odyssey, radio drama, or something like that, where you can talk about, like, oh, wow, that was really considerate when this person saw that their friend needed help and they helped them, or let the other person go first, or they shared with them because they thought there wasn't enough, or whatever. But you can pull the characteristics that you want to see in your kid's life from the stories you read, the movies they watch. Take the time to engage with them and talk about, why is that a good example? Why is it not a good example? To teach and train them what it is that you want. Another good resource is Scales of Virtue. There's stories taken from all of history and all different cultures, but focus on different character traits. Because, again, stories are memorable, so they're helpful in being able to help those lessons stick better. Jesus taught in parables and stories because they help us remember.